So Anthropic just unleashed Mythos to the public. Kinda. It's actually called Claude Fable 5, which is a Mythos class model that we've made safe for general use, and its capabilities exceed those of any model we've ever made generally available. And with my limited time coding with it since it was released yesterday, I'm inclined to agree. But holy smokes, is it expensive. I normally run the $100 per month 5x max plan, and I rarely ever hit my limit. And if I do, it's typically towards the end of the current session, so it's about to reset. But Fable 5, on the other hand, absolutely tears through my usage limits, and it did so in about 30 minutes. All I had to do was, a little front-end work, redesign the entire app to match the design and style of a new landing page that I made, and it deployed 8 agents in parallel to accomplish that task, as well as to scan the entire codebase for security vulnerabilities and any bugs, which it deployed 6 parallel review agents to do that. And then I had it double check to ensure these are all real and then fix them. And I'm surprised that it actually allowed me to do that, because when I asked it to create a report on exactly what it did and what it found and what it remediated, it said, this is flagged for cybersecurity or biology topics. We're going to auto switch you to Opus 4.8 because Fable 5 has some serious safeguards around it, which basically blocks you from doing any sort of cybersecurity work, any sort of biology work, and any sort of ML research or LLM development work. However, for the latter two, it doesn't tell you that it's switching to Opus 4.8. And they specify that the safeguards in this regard will not be visible to the user. Fable 5 will not fall back to a different model. Instead, the safeguards will limit effectiveness through methods such as prompt modification, steering vectors, or parameter efficient fine tuning. So it's going to throttle the effectiveness of Fable 5 if you try to do any sort of frontier LLM development or anything related to it. And that's just the tip of the iceberg in regards to what all of this has to offer. I also had it try to create an entire app from a single MD file. The benchmarks appear to be off the charts if you're into that kind of thing. I'm not, because I think most of them, if not all of them, are pretty daggum worthless. But we'll talk about them. But on the plus side, I am stoked on vision, where Fable 5 beat Pokemon Fire Red from start to finish using only raw game screenshots. No maps, no navigation aids, no extra game state information, no helper harness to play the game, but with vision and vision alone. And as somebody who used to build neural nets from scratch in order to do things like this, well, I think this is pretty cool. And we're going to dive into all of this and more. But since Anthropic decides that it wants to charge me more than I've ever paid before just to test out Fable 5 for this video, well, I got to pay for it somehow. So here's a word from today's sponsor. AI made writing code fast, but it did nothing for the waiting. I'll push a change, and then I just sit there watching CI crawl, watching a Docker pull download the same layers that it just downloaded an hour ago. So while the coding got faster, now I just spend more time waiting. And Depot exists to kill that waiting. Their runners are drop-in compatible with GitHub Actions, and their CLI is a drop-in replacement for Docker build, with your layer cache held in their registry and served through a CDN, which means it's the same cache on your machine, same cache on the CI, and the same cache for the agents. It's quite literally just one line change from Docker build to Depot build, and you're able to use it with your existing CI provider and dev workflows, whether it's GitHub Actions or Depot CI, which is Depot's own CI engine, because they optimized GitHub Actions as much as they possibly could. So they wanted to take it a step further and be able to speed up the entire pipeline. With one thing that just makes so much sense, they run these in parallel instead of one after another like GitHub Actions does. I don't know why GitHub Actions doesn't do that themselves. But here's something I am very excited about: the now available Depot CI API and CLI. And what their engineer wrote here is exactly how I feel. The way I work now with agents and how I code, I don't sit in dashboards. I sit in my editor with an agent next to me when CI breaks. I don't want to alt-tab into a browser, hunt down the run, scroll the logs, and rebuild the whole story in my head. I want to ask one of my agents what broke. I'm already in that window. I want to stay in that window and get an answer. And now we can do that because the agent can reach for the same information via the CLI as you can via the dashboard. So if you want faster builds and CI that your agent can actually see, go to jetty.to/depot or click the link in the top of the description. So first things first, I just made a video all about the Mythos situation, going from their announcement, why I think they called it too dangerous and a lot of the fear mongering that was going on, getting all the Fortune 500 clients, announcing it in Project Glasswing, just in time for their final funding raise of roughly $1 trillion, and they're filing for an IPO, as well as some case studies from Firefox team, as well as Curl, and me putting on my best tinfoil hat to figure out why the heck they did what they did and how they did it. So basically the entire Mythos story leading up to this point, all in only about 15 minutes. I think it's worth the watch, but I am also a little bit biased. But you can kind of think of this as a part 2, where we learn more about Fable 5 and Mythos and also see how it actually codes. But I think it's only right that we go through their actual announcement of it and how they intend Fable 5 to be used. And no, I'm not going to read this entire article. You can do that on your own time, but there are a few little tidbits I'd like to talk about. Starting with the safeguards. They fully acknowledge that there are safeguards. The only reason why they are releasing Fable 5 instead of Mythos is because it is the safeguarded version of Mythos, or at least that's how they describe it. They say, without safeguards, Fable 5's capabilities in areas like cybersecurity could be misused to cause serious damage. We've therefore launched the model with safeguards that mean queries on some topics will instead receive a response from our next most capable model, Claude Opus 4.8, which triggers at even the slightest indication of anything that has to do with cybersecurity or biology and life sciences or ML research, or you can expand from there. Anything that touches that spider web, Fable 5 gets cut. And if you're wondering what Mythos 5 is, it is for a small group of cyber defenders and infrastructure providers. So us layman folk, you and I, we do not get access to Mythos 5. Mythos 5 is an upgraded version to Claude Mythos Preview, which is what we know as Mythos. You know how I said this model was super expensive? It does say it's being offered at only $10 per million input tokens and $50 per million output tokens, which as you can see is 2x what Opus 4.8 is. And they are not being shy about this. If you come down here to model, you will see that Fable 5 is the most capable for your hardest and longest running tasks and uses your limits 2x faster than Opus because it's 2 times more expensive than Opus. And speaking of cost, use it while you can, folks, if you can actually get it to do what you need it to do, because on June 23rd, they will remove Fable 5 from these plans, from the subscription plans that are Pro, Max, Team, and seat-based enterprise plans, and they will move it, and thereafter you can only use it via their API, via usage credits. So I say use it while you can, but also do not become dependent on it, unless you want to spend a whole boatload of money when it moves over to usage credits, which means you will have to move over there too, which also means no more subsidization of Fable 5 beyond June 23rd, which actually reminds me, if you work in enterprise, Fable 5 is a no-go for you because something they did is they implemented a new data retention policy. Normally, what you probably have set up is 0 data retention. You can use Opus 4.8, 0 data retention, and you're good to go, depending on what level you are. You know who you are if you are using the 0 data retention policy. However, they're making a change to the way they handle business customer data for Fable 5, Mythos 5, and future models with similar or higher capability levels. So any Mythos class model, if you need 0 data retention, you will not be able to use it because they are going to require 30-day retention for all traffic on those models, on both first and third-party surfaces. We won't use this data to train new Claude models or for any non-safety related purpose. And we've instituted new privacy protections, including logging all human access to the data and ensuring its deletion after 30 days in almost all cases. I feel like that almost is carrying a lot of weight here. kind of like a plausible deniability thing there. But the data will help us defend against complex and novel attacks, including new jailbreaks and attacks that operate across many requests, as well as help us identify and reduce false positives. So that is one of the most important sections for many of y'all watching this video, because I know I have a lot of Java devs who watch my videos, and y'all work in code bases that need to be on that zero data retention policy. You can't use Fable 5. And I do want to reiterate, they also specify third-party services. So if you're on GovCloud, FedRAMP, BAAs, whatever you're going through, however you get Fable 5, it does not matter, which is kind of wild. But I wanted to make sure you're aware. Now back up to the benchmark here. It groups Mythos 5 and Fable 5 into its own column. And it says in every single category, except for computer use and multidisciplinary reasoning, it is the best model. With the only reason they're not the best in those two is because Mythos Preview was better. But there is one gripe I have with this benchmark, besides the fact that it is a coding benchmark and these I just never trust. It's that Mythos 5 is carrying a lot of the weight. Because when it comes to biology and when it comes to cybersecurity, Fable 5 cannot do those things as we've discussed. Therefore, these sections for Fable 5 is 0% because it can't do them. Just something to keep in mind. There are more benchmarks that you can look at if you so wish, but I want to come over to Vision because it is just so cool. I don't see that much more information about it, but I want to read it to you. Fable 5 is a new state-of-the-art model for tasks involving vision. It can extract precise numbers from detailed scientific figures and can perform complex vision-based tasks like rebuilding a web app's source code from screenshots alone. It also needs less scaffolding. For example, previous Claude models struggled to play Pokemon Fire even with harnesses that gave them additional helpful tools. But Fable 5 beat Fire Red with a minimal vision-only harness. So earlier I did say no harness, but what I meant to say was Fable 5 did not need a complex helper harness like previous Claude models. So yeah, that's Vision. I wish they would have shared more about it because I'd really like to see more of how it worked. And I would go over some of this stuff, but it's all the molecular biology stuff that if you ask Fable 5 to perform or help you with, or even ask questions about this, it'll say no and switch to Opus 4.8. Let's actually give that a shot. I'm going to copy this paragraph right here that starts with novel hypotheses in molecular biology, and I'm going to make it so it doesn't switch the model automatically. We're on Fable 5, high effort. I'm going to paste this, and I want to see, I have a feeling that this was going to happen. Of course, from its own announcement post. Fable 5 has safety measures that flag messages in most cybersecurity or biology topics, and it's not going to perform it. So if you want to continue, go ahead with Opus 4.8. I mean, look at this one. This is from low level. We all love low level. What type of security research are you allowed to do? Like if I hook you up to Ghidra MCP, are you allowed to bug hunt? Just asking a simple question of Fable 5's capabilities, and it said, whoa. I can't answer that question for you. This has something to do with cybersecurity research. So if you want, we can continue with Opus 4.8, which is absolutely insane. I mean, this example that I showed earlier where it switched to Opus 4.8 was me asking it to create a write-up or even a website, something that lays out all of the findings from the security vulnerabilities and bug audit that I asked it to do that surprisingly it did, and provide any info about the false positive, because there was a false positive, and a handful of other things. And then it's like, sorry, I can't do that. I'm like, wait, what? I'm just asking you to double check these things that you already did, and you're saying you can't do it, and you're switching to Opus 4.8. It is a very frustrating user experience, which is why I'm harping on it a little bit more than maybe I probably should. In regards to these safeguards, I do want to point out one thing. Andres Karpathy, the guy that coined the term vibe coding, he's a very well-known AI researcher, I believe would be the proper title for him, who now works for Anthropic. He said about Fable 5 that the safeguards are configured to be a little too trigger happy for launch, which can hopefully be tuned over time. So hopefully that's the case. Now, does that mean those safeguards would be loosened so much that you would be able to ask Fable 5 about biology questions and cybersecurity things? No. What it does mean is that adjacent questions to biology and adjacent questions to cybersecurity will not get flagged. So that way, when you're mid-coding session, it doesn't automatically switch to Opus 4.8 because it touches the runtime, which I've had experience with it auto-switching to Opus 4.8 because I said anything about a runtime. And holy smokes, I had to try this one out real quick. Is the mitochondria the powerhouse of the cell? And then it thought for a second and was like, sorry, biology. Can't answer that one, switching to Opus 4.8. This question. So hopefully when they talk about safeguards will be loosened up and fine-tuned to not be so trigger happy, we can at least figure out if mitochondria is in fact the powerhouse of the cell. So that's what we know about Fable 5. But how does it actually code? Well, it is in fact the best coding model that I've ever used. It's better than Opus 4.8, it's better than GPT 5.5, and I've used both of those on varying effort levels, and Fable 5 on high effort is better than all of them in my limited experience. Because again, it's only been out for about a day now. And the reason I say that is because when looking at the code quality, when looking at the bugs that it was able to find compared to me doing that same exact scan in the same exact code base with Opus 4.8 as well as GPT 5.5 in separate work trees, so there's no influence from one model to another model because it's completely separate, Fable 5 performed the best at finding them as well as remediating them. Now, if you can't get it to actually scan your code base, then it's not better. But I got lucky apparently because I also tried to scan Hyperland's C++ code base with the same exact prompt that I gave my own code base, and Fable 5 wouldn't do it. It auto switched to Opus 4.8. So there is a give and a take there where if Fable 5 doesn't do a task, then obviously it's not better than any other model at that task because it can't do it. But it did it for me. I had Opus 4.8 whip up the report for it. I whittled that down, double checked everything, looked at the code, and created this nice little write-up. 5 things I found: auditing my own URL shortener, which is exactly what this project is, a TypeScript tan stack start project. This is the new design. This is the old design of a URL link shortener, link intelligence platform. Basically, all of my custom links that I use in these videos and elsewhere, I have all of the data just like Bitly, but my own. So now that we have that context of what the project is, we can take a look at what Fable 5 did. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was a public endpoint that was handing out password hashes. Fable 5 found this bit of code in my code base that had no auth check and returned the entire link row. So what that means is that anyone could post a slug and get back the link's bcrypt password hash for offline cracking plus internal user ID, workspace ID with no login required. And how this code works is that in TanStack start, every create server function is a publicly callable RPC endpoint. But in my code, somewhere along the lines, whether it was me or whether it was AI, where this was called must have been deleted because this was dead code. This wasn't used anywhere. And that's exactly how Fable 5 fixed it. It just deleted it, which is the perfect fix considering it was dead code that was still live and exploitable. So it found bad code that wasn't used, deleted the code. That's good. But this is not so good. It reported a bug that wasn't actually a bug. It gave us a false positive. So what it thought it found was a privilege escalation bug where admins could invite new users as admins, bypassing an owner-only permission. What this means is when you create a link, you are the owner and the admin of that link. And I wanted to be able to share these custom links between users so you could add another admin who could come in and view the analytics and do what they needed to do on the admin level. Like, let's say I have an employee who creates these links for me and includes them in my videos. So that way they can do whatever they need to do and I don't have to worry about it. That is how it's supposed to work. But what the agent thought it found was that create invite has no role gating. An admin can mint new admins, escalating past the owner-only change roles permission. However, the handler does gate the role, but the agent just missed that snippet of the code where it says it has role-based access within ensure workspace role assignable. And not only did it miss that code, but it also thought that my intended feature was a bug, which I don't really know how to take that. So the thing is, admins assigning admin to new members is the intended model. It's documented throughout. This is what I wanted. So what it ended up doing is just discarding this bug altogether. No code was changed. Sorry, false positive. And this is exactly why you don't ship an AI's findings without reading the code yourself, which kind of contradicts one of Fable 5's huge selling points, which is it is an amazing model that does way more than any other model when given a single goal or endpoint or just a single prompt. Or what I did in a different use case was I created an entire 16-page MD file, gave it to Fable 5 and said, do it. And then it just did it nonstop. That's one of Fable 5's selling points. I don't know if this is by Anthropic or by other users of the model, but it's really good at taking vague prompts and finding its way there with decent quality code. But that also results in over 500, 600,000 lines of code that you have to review that it whipped up in, 30 minutes. And then there are a handful of other things. So it found a bug, and then it realized upon the double check that it was actually worse than initially reported. And that's basically, I forgot to implement a reserved slug check. So when you go to the sign-in page, it's jetty.so/sign-in. So that sign-in or sign-up or dashboard slug should be reserved. Nobody should be able to use that slug for their own custom link. Kinda. You see, I did have some reserved slugs, but they were case sensitive. So in other words, in order to create a custom slug, they could have created a sign-in custom slug by including capital letters, which obviously is not good. And upon further inspection, this exact check duplicated in a second file, the fallback route, also case sensitive and missing 6 other routes. So if it only were to fix one of those worker entries, it would have left the hole open through the other path that was there. But upon the double check, it found the other path and then it went in and it fixed it. And then I'm going to skip number 4, but you can take a look at exactly what happened here because I want to get to number 5. And that is the fixes weren't all the best code in the world. So deleting the dead code, that was good. The one reserved slug module, that was good. But then it had a half adopted shared util, which made a shared helper, then left the duplicate, as you can see down here with escape HTML. So what it needs to do now is go through, import the shared one here, and delete the local copy. And then for this dashboard analytics bug, it fixed the real bug, any transient error used to lock the page behind the paywall. But the discriminator should be a typed error code from the server, not a regex on human readable text. And that's really it. As for the front end stuff, I don't really care that much, to be honest with you, because it was already basing the design implementation on an existing design on the landing page. So it didn't have to come up with anything unique. It just had to implement what was already in the code. So where does that leave us? Well, before I said that Fable 5 is the best coding model I ever used. But the real question is it worth it? Because there are at least 2 trade-offs that you are making when using Fable 5. One is that it is incredibly slow. And 2 is that it is much more expensive than any other model that I've used. Because for example, I put it head to head, Fable 5, Opus 4.8, GPT 5.5, and I gave it the same feature to implement in a codebase. The latter 2 took about 2 to 3 minutes and cost about $2 to $3, which, as you may know, I'm on a subscription plan for both of these. But if you look at the usage and you look at the tokens, the input, the output, and then look how much they cost, you can do a little bit of math and figure out how much they cost. So 2 to 3 minutes, $2 to $3. But when it came to Fable 5, it took 23 minutes to complete the same exact task, and it cost $11. And here's the real kicker, is that all of the code was passable. Sure, it needed a couple tweaks here and there, but just to get it up to my standards, but it all worked. It all passed. It's just Fable took 10 times longer and cost 5 times more. And the more I use it, the less I believe the individuals that claim that it is the next coming of Opus 4.5. Because I don't know if any of y'all remember December 2025, everybody realized that Opus 4.5 is actually leaps and bounds better than the model previous. A lot of people are saying the same thing about Fable 5, and I see where they're coming from, but not entirely. Because when it comes to the coding capabilities on what you would typically do on everyday tasks, not so much. But you know how Boris Cherny has been talking about loops? He doesn't prompt Claude anymore. He works in loops heavily. It actually makes sense to me now because obviously he's been using these Mythos class models internally, and this is what it's really good at. When you give Fable 5 a highly targeted task, something that it needs to do, and it will be able to figure out everything along the way based on what you gave it, that's when it really shines. It takes a long time, but I would rather a model take a long time and give me quality code than be really fast and give me crappy code. And what I mean is when folks are giving goals. So you give a goal, Fable 5 blows the others out the water. It's very good at deploying all of these parallel agents to tackle all of these different tasks and work with one another. It's nothing that I've seen before compared to the other models. Is it really that important? Maybe not yet, but I think it will be in the coming months, year or so. But that's a prediction. I hate making predictions. But I also think a big reason why they do it this way, not only because it is really good at that compared to the other models, but because since it's so slow, this is not a model that you're working back and forth with on any sort of consistent basis. It's something like try to git push. It'll take multiple minutes. This is something where you need to give it a task and let it ride, not go back and forth, or else you're just going to be sitting there wasting a whole bunch of time. And I actually did this, but instead of giving it a goal, I worked with Fable 5 to create this 225-line design document where it created vision and guiding principles, the scope for the project, as well as what to do in different phases like the research phase, the synthesis engine, which I'll get to why we need that here in a second, as well as the build order and verification and anticipated failure modes. I gave Fable 5 this MD file with a prompt to say, do it effectively and don't stop until it's done. And it deployed all of those different parallel agents that I previously discussed and created this. A researched soundscape time machine where you can pick a city street, drag the timeline from 1850 to 2026, and hear what it sounded like on that street during that time, but not with actual recorded sounds. All audio is synthesized in the browser from mathematics. There are no recordings here whatsoever. We can click on begin in 1890, and you can hear a lot of these different sounds. And you can click on different things, change the master volume. We can have it gradually go to 1868. And I'm going to pause it right there because I just wanted to show you what it could do with a single prompt where it synthesized all of these sounds. Are they perfect? No. It created this entire website, and I know it can do a whole lot more than just that. You can have it deploy more agents. You can have it run for a longer time on something that is more spec'd out, more detailed, or more ambitious, and it will do it. Now, again, that'll leave you hundreds of thousands of lines to review if you're actually going to review it, but it's impressive nonetheless. So with all that being said, what do you think of Fable 5? Is it worth it with how slow it is and how expensive it is? Or is it something that you're just really going to keep in your back pocket for the special occasion where Opus 4.8 or GPT 5.5 or even you struggle to complete a specific task? Because once it goes over to the unsubsidized offering via the API instead of the plan, that's how I'm going to use it. But that's Fable 5. That's where we are in the Mythos story. And let me just tell you, Anthropic is getting scary. And I don't just mean because Fable 5 is a good model. I mean because of how they are trying to control everything and only offer frontier models to a select few hundred companies that they approve of and that will spend millions of dollars, and give us layman folk the heavily safeguarded version of the best model that's out there. And that is only the tip of the iceberg. But don't even get me started on that. Good model, bad company. I'll see y'all in the next one.